Why you should fail in more spectacular fashion. Elon Musk and blowing up rockets. Failure is looked upon as a negative thing in society. We see failure. Failure is a deviation from the desired outcome. So for example, you want to jump 30 inches in the air and maybe you only get to 28.5. You failed. You didn't hit your goal. You're lacking in some sort of success. Oftentimes, when we fail, we close off, we get smaller, we internalize what other people say, we feel like shit about ourselves. I've certainly had many moments in my life where I fail and I don't reach the goal that I wanted to reach. And I make myself or other people make me feel like shit, but more importantly and more impactfully, I make myself feel like shit because I internalize that failure narrative. I associate failure with my lack of goodness in some way, with my lack of ability to make a difference in some way in the things that I want to do. And Elon Musk said something pretty cool recently. He was talking about the fact that he blows up rockets, and it happens quite often. This was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and Elon Musk refers to the blowing up of rockets as a rapid, unscheduled disassembly. So rather than seeing the explosion in the sky of a rocket as a failure, it is a rapid, unscheduled disassembly. He sees this as something pretty normal. He sees this as we're going to Mars. We're trying to do something fucking absurd. It's weird. It's absurd. It's grand. We should be blowing up rockets in spectacular fashion. There should be rapid, unscheduled disassemblies. It would be weird if we weren't blowing up rockets, to be frank. It seems like that's how Elon Musk thinks. When you are trying to accomplish a goal like going to Mars that is so fucking absurd, so fucking wild, and at the same time possible, it would be weird if you weren't shooting for the stars, literally, and missing spectacularly, blowing shit up, fucking shit up on the road to accomplishing what you want to accomplish. And that got me to think about failure differently and to not beat myself up as much with failure. And I see there's a spectrum of goals. There's the small goals that you do every day. There's the small things that you try to accomplish, your habitual goals that you do on a daily basis, whether it's something like record a daily podcast, whether it's doing a meeting, whether it's writing an article. There are the small things that you do. And you should be nailing those small things 90% of the time. Those small goals, you should have them under your belt. You should take ownership over the small shit. And the more you have that small, the small things in line and the small things accomplished, that will give you the foundation to launch some fucking rockets. And so your rate of success should be pretty high with the small habitual daily things, and that high rate of success will give you a stronger foundation to fail in spectacular fashion for when you try to do things like go to fucking Mars. So in my life, I can't speak to what it's like to build rockets and try to go to another planet. I can speak to podcasting. And so something that's a smaller goal of mine that I hammer down every day are things like creating reels for IG. That takes me, 20, 30 minutes to chop up podcasts and especially guest conversations, putting out interesting clips. Recording a daily podcast like this takes me about 10, 15 minutes to record, another maybe 20 minutes to edit and put up. Answering emails, research, coming up with topics and questions, the things that I have to do for my full-time job, those are the things that I do on a daily basis. Those are things that are more habitual. They're easier. I have those locked in pretty well. The bigger goals with podcasting, my version of shooting rockets would be something like getting Post Malone on the podcast. That is someone that I would love to talk to. I think he's super interesting. He makes great art. He seems to have some fascinating ideas. He seems like a cool dude to talk to. And Post Malone's fucking huge. That's something that may never happen. That's something that I may never get to in my podcasting careers, interviewing Post Malone. And so for me to do that, I have to be shooting my shot regularly and trying big things and be willing to not have a high rate of success for those grander goals, like having Post Malone on the podcast, getting him on the podcast, other people like him that are also, they don't have a lot of free time. They have thousands of people hitting them up. That's a huge goal, and I shouldn't expect a high rate of success. And I should be willing to try some crazy shit, some wild shit to get people on the podcast like that. Another idea that I have, another goal of mine is to sell out Madison Square Garden for a podcast. I don't know how that's going to happen, but I have written down on a whiteboard outside one of the ways that I go big. I have a whiteboard and it says how to go big with Auxoro, how to go big with podcasting, essentially. And I have a lot of these crazy fucking ideas and I look at it every day. And one of the things I have written down there is selling out Madison Square Garden with a podcast. And I don't know how I'm going to do that. How do you get, 15, 20,000 people to buy tickets to see a podcast? And in my mind, I have a way that comes together with a panel of interesting people from all different fields. Maybe there are 2 acts to that. Maybe you have the podcast first, and then there's kind of an intermission, and then there's some sort of live performance. Maybe it's a mix of the two. I don't know, but I have that in the back of my mind, and I'm willing to take some fucking shots at that and fail spectacularly, not blowing up rockets literally or blowing up in my face, but being willing to put a lot of energy into things that there's a high chance it's not going to work out, or if it does, it's not going to be how I think it's going to work out. And so that there are 2 types of goals. There's a small shit, hammer that down, get that in check so that you can take chances on the larger shit and have that foundation and experience some rapid, unscheduled disassemblies of your own, to not be afraid of launching some shit out into the ether and seeing what happens. And I'm not one of those guys or gals that thinks that there's a success behind every failure. People say, every failure is really a success if you look at it. I think that's bullshit. I don't believe in that. Sometimes you fail. It sucks. There's nothing really to gain with it other than having the strength to move on and continue to push yourself and pursue the things that you want to do passionately and in an uplifting fashion. Sometimes you just fail and it fucking sucks. But I would hope that this podcast, this little rant of mine, and I'm doing a lot of this for myself as well, I would hope this changes the way you think about failure a little bit, where you're willing to fail, you're willing to embrace failure when it comes to the really big things, when you're taking the really big shot, and to let failure actually embolden you, to see it as a sign of, I'm willing to take risks, I'm willing to fail spectacularly, I'm willing to dance with failure on a large scale, I'm willing to do it on a public platform, I'm willing to put my ideas out there, I'm willing to get rejected, I don't take it personally. And I'm not letting failure shrink me. I'm taking the shots I want to take. And when it comes to things like launching rockets to Mars, whether it's selling out Madison Square Garden with podcasts, I just spoke to Aubrey de Grey, who's a scientist that's working on extending human lifespan and ending the battle against aging. Like, those are huge fucking goals, and you have to be willing to fail in some pretty big fucking ways to get to these successes down the line. That's what I hope to convey to you, and also internalize in myself, is that when you're going after the big shit, it would be weird if you weren't failing. And if you aren't failing when you're going after big shit, that's probably a sign to you that what you're going after is not big enough. If you're going after something huge and you're not failing, and you're not failing big, you probably need to 10x the way that you're thinking, and say, how can I take some bigger shots? And so my challenge to you is to see failure on the spectrum that it is, with the different types of goals and things that you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to do small shit, if you're trying to hammer down like the daily stuff, you got to do this, like you're checking boxes, that needs to be super high success rate. You need to make sure you have that in check before you go after the big shit. And then recognize that when you're going after the big shit, it would be weird if you're not failing. And so that's my challenge to you. Challenge to myself is to not internalize failure as always a negative thing. Yeah, sure, it sucks. Sometimes it's negative. Sometimes it's a signal that you need to get your shit together. Other times it's like, all right, I took a huge fucking shot, and you know what? It blew up. It disassembled rapidly, and I'm going to gear up for the next shot. I'm going to dance with failure. I'm going to let it empower me. I'm going to let it embolden me. And I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep pushing. So thank you for listening. You can subscribe to The Aux on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen for the daily podcast. I'm going to release an episode on YouTube like this about once a week. The daily podcast is available wherever you listen. So thanks for tuning in, and I will talk to you guys next time.